Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. And thank you so much for letting me share the screen with such renowned professors on the subject. Junaid has introduced you to the topic, which is regime change and Pakistan experience. I'm going to give you a bit gist of the topic, that what has happened so far. But let me talk about it and further in a historical perspective. Regime change is not a new phenomenon for Pakistani masses, and this is not. It has not started with the current political coup, I would say, in Pakistan. Pakistani masses has gone through it for years and years, and yet again, Pakistan is in the throes of internal and external change, regime change. And when I say internal, of course, this massive South Asian nation is facing its fifth military attempt of regime change in Pakistan. And when I say external, one should not ignore the role of United States and post 9/11 political intervention strategies of United States. In the countries like Pakistan, we can see it globally in Middle East, in everywhere. But recently in Pakistan, it was so visible, and most of the evidences are on the record. So the regime change in Pakistan, the regimes in Pakistan, the de facto regimes, when I say, or the democratic regimes, are mostly hybrid. Imran Khan's government was no different. Of course, no government in Pakistan is having that freedom to come in the independence from the institutions in Pakistan, and especially the institutions which play the major power play. In 2022, when the constitutional move was made, to remove Imran Khan from the office, it was called a failure of hybrid regime. Some called it as a result of deteriorating economic situation. Others called it strained relations with the United States. I would say that it was an amalgamation of every aspect which I mentioned. And this made a chaotic situation which is currently prevailing in Pakistan. The question for the day is there is still an opportunity in this crisis between the country's military power or the civilian stakeholders to break free through the casualty loophole which has created since 2022. Also, when I talk about the current crisis, there was a major role played by the United States, and it was very crucial role behind the political engineering of regime change plot. On 27th of March, after getting removed constitutionally, a documentary evidence was presented against the United States. Imran Khan mentioned it, that it was the whole plot and an opposition effort to oust him. Now, the current political situation is a tantamount engagement of fifth attempt. If we look into the history of Pakistan, let's start from 1950s. In 1950s, when General Marshal Ayub Khan started this tradition of getting intervened into the political scenario directly, he ruled from 1959 to 69. Then General Yahya Khan, of course, from 1969 to 71. Mr. Ziaul Haq from 77 to 88. General Musharraf from 99 to 2008. And during all these eras, the military leadership engaged in subversion of the constitutional process, seeking to create a system that subordinates the legislature, a powerful presidency led by the top journals of the time. Despite the elaborate constitutional engagement, Each attempt failed when the military could not longer sustain the political setup. And they had to go back from these experiments, and they had to restore the democratic politics in the country to run the political machinery of the country. The duration of this whole period, the constitutional politics were varied, but the common denominator, which we say, is that military tried to process this to process of civilization or civilianization behind the scenes and maneuvering. So there was a manipulation involved in that. So the question now is there, what is the difference between the past political coups and now this political coup which has made? Those coups were directly coming through the generals, the sitting generals, and now the current coup is differently plotted, is differently played by the political actors of Pakistan. Um, the impulsion of hybrid regimes also mark a serious question on the nature of democracy in Pakistan and the future of democracy in Pakistan. Another question on the whole process, which happened after 2022, is that a constitutional move was used to remove a prime minister from his office. So the constitution, how the constitution is playing role to weaken the democracy in Pakistan is again a question. And dismissing a majority elected prime minister by the minority within the constitutional restraints, is it just with the process of democracy? I'm leaving the panel with these questions, and I would like further to pass on the floor to Professor Junaid. Professor Junaid is our moderator for today. And Professor Junaid teaches law, religion, and global politics. And he's the director of Center of Study of Islam and Decolonization in Islamabad. In Pakistan, he is a member of MLN and the movement for liberation from Nakba, Shape, Saving Humanity, and the Planet for Earth. UPISC, the Pakistan Interreligious Coalition, as well as just the international movement for the just world. Over to you, Dr. Junaid.
Thanks so much, Mariam. I think that the questions you have identified for our panelists today are incredibly important. They seem to be the most relevant and pertinent in terms of our understanding of what has transpired, and of course, what is now taking place as a result of the events of March, April 2022, and the excessive, more than excessive, the brutal repression that has ensued that period up until right now. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Professor Sachs. I think he's going to join us shortly, but I also wanted to welcome Khadija Shah from Pakistan. I think that it will be incredibly useful for us to hear from her about what has transpired since that regime change in 2022. She has been a direct victim of the way the Pakistani national security state, the police state, has dealt with the mass mobilizations, not just in defense of Imran Khan, but certainly against the type of totalitarian, to put it bluntly, regime of civil military regime, much more of that hybrid regime than Khan and under Khan. So I think that we certainly look forward to hearing from her. What I will do now is both introduce our two speakers. One is Professor Sachs, and the other one is Professor Jabbar. Let me go ahead and start the introduction of Professor Sachs. Hassanal, is he joined yet?
He hasn't joined yet, so I'm still working on getting him on.
Okay. So let me go ahead and introduce Professor Jabbar, although I think that Professor Sachs probably will be our first speaker, but just not to waste any time, let me go ahead and do that. All right, okay. So, Professor Abdul-Jabbar is an educator, writer, and activist for global justice based in San Francisco, California. He received the prestigious Fulbright Scholarship Award in 1965 that brought him from Pakistan to the United States for higher studies. At that time, Fulbright Scholarship was awarded to only one person per country per field of study. He received his PhD in English from Case Western University in Cleveland, Ohio. After the one-year Fulbright Scholarship ran out, the university granted him a fellowship for 2 years to enable him to finish his doctoral dissertation. It was rare in the university's history to grant a fellowship based on academic accomplishment to someone for 2 consecutive years. Based on his teaching and scholarship, he received 2 awards from the National Endowment for the Humanities. And in terms of what's most relevant for our webinar today, Professor Jabbar has stood out virtually alone over the past around 2 years in consistently writing and speaking about what has happened in Pakistan, the regime change and its consequences for the country and for people within the country and outside of Pakistan who have consistently been raising their voices against what has transpired and the military civilian regime and their repression. On a personal note, Professor Jabbar has been a pillar of support for others like myself to continue speaking out despite the very repressive tactics of the Pakistani state, both within Pakistan as well as what we now know even abroad, what we call transnational repression going on. So his courageous voice has also enabled someone like me to continue writing and speaking out in an otherwise very lonely political landscape. Well, some of his important books include particularly his most recent one. Let me just get to it. Yeah, Reading and Writing with Multicultural Literature in Search of Reconciliation and Peace, which McGraw-Hill called the most original and creative literature textbook I have ever seen, and a brilliant, innovative work. In addition, he has published a book titled Not of an Age, but for All Time, Revolutionary Humanism in Iqbal, Manto, and Faz. And his book, The Promise, Reality, and Potential of America's Cultural Diversity, Evidence from History, Literature, and Film, is in the process of publication. In addition to that, he's, of course, attended many conferences on issues such as these. But like I said, what has been incredibly important for many of us is his role as a public intellectual in speaking out against what has transpired. And I would note that especially someone being of Pakistani descent, it's been quite rare to find these voices who have been persistently speaking about what's going on. So, Professor Jabbar, I will get back to you in a second, but let me go ahead and introduce our other guest, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. And hopefully by the end of the introduction, he will have joined us. Let's see. Yes. So we can tell Professor Sachs that we've introduced him when he joined us. So Professor Jeffrey Sachs, a towering intellectual in the world today, is university professor and director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, where he directed the Earth Institute from 2002 until 2016. He is president of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, co-chair of the Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition, commissioner of the UN Broadband Commission for Development, academic mission of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences at the Vatican, and Tan Sri Jeffrey Chi, Honorary Distinguished Professor at Sunway University. He has been special advisor to 3 United Nations Secretaries General and currently serves as an SDG advocate under Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He spent over 20 years as a professor at Harvard University, where he received his BA, MA, and PhD degrees. Professor Sachs has received 42 honorary doctorates, and his recent awards include the 2022 Tang Prize in Sustainable Development, the Legion of Honor by decree of the President of the Republic of France, and the Order of the Cross from the President of Estonia. His most recent books are The Ages of Globalization, Geography, Technology, and Institutions in 2020, and Ethics in Action for Sustainable Development in 2022. And in a similar light to Professor Jabbar, he has also been one of the only individuals in the West, a Western public intellectual, who have not let this issue, not let it go, in terms of, again, very persistently and relentlessly speaking about the regime change operation in Pakistan, and especially the U.S. role in that regime change. Again, just like Professor Jabbar, they are voices in the wilderness, but have given many of us strength and the courage to continue to speak about this issue. And that is precisely the context in which we are now holding this webinar, which I think is long overdue. And it's been very unfortunate that we have not had more such events and commentary on an issue which, it must be said, affects one of the largest countries in the world, a very important country like Pakistan, over 220 million, and of course nuclear armed, and which has struck many people who have followed these events as being quite neglected in terms of commentary in particularly in the West about what has happened, considering the very pivotal role of the West, and particularly Washington, in engineering this constitutional regime change against the former Prime Minister Imran Khan. So I have introduced both of our speakers, and just want to check with Hassanal. Has Professor Sachs joined us yet?
Sorry, Junaid. Unfortunately, Professor Sachs hasn't joined us yet. I think it's best if we proceed with Professor Jabbar first, as the previous agenda. Thanks.
Great. Okay, Professor Jabbar, we would love to hear some of your insights into both what has transpired and the criminality of the actors involved, and how do we hold them accountable. So, Professor Jabbar, welcome. We're very grateful to have you, and please go ahead and address us today.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Greetings of peace. And Professor Junaid Ahmed, thank you so much for your very generous introduction. And I must say that you also have been a source of inspiration to people like me with your work, which has been pretty courageous and risky, I must say, especially in view of what is being done to Pakistanis who are living overseas. I will share with you a couple of things, but I don't want to make your blood boil too much, but you should have some maybe water nearby when I mention a few of these facts. Perhaps my presentation should have come with an advisory. I would try to make it as civil, polite as possible. Some of the facts are just outrageous. So to begin with, I would like to share with you my understanding as to why the US government has orchestrated more regime change operations than any other country in the world. Since the Second World War, over 70 countries have been the victim of the so-called regime change operation. Actually, literally, the world is littered with the wreckage of countries that have been destroyed by our regime change operations. The mindset that makes it possible was actually articulated by a senator. Now that's really important to understand why US can do all this, destroy so many countries, and continues to just do that. There's no way to stop it. So a senator, I will read to you, share with you his comments in the context of the invasion of Philippines. So this is what he said on the Senate floor. And what his words are actually in the speech are actually, you can transport them to today and you will see no substantive change in the policy. Perhaps it has become more subtle. So this is what he said. The Philippines are ours forever. And just beyond the Philippines are China's illimitable markets. We will not retreat from either. We will not renounce our part in the mission of our race, trustee under God of the civilization of the world. The Philippines give us a base at the door of all of the East. And especially these two lines are very important. He says, it has been charged that our conduct of war has been cruel. Senators must remember that we are not dealing with Americans or Europeans. We are dealing with Orientals. End of the quotation. Now just think about that, the content and the attitude. So you can understand why when we destroy 1 million innocent Iraqis, it doesn't really faze our government. It is no big deal because they cook up all kinds of excuses and they justify their action. So my first concern in talking to you about this is that we should understand the mindset that makes it happen and the attitude that our government has. At the same time, I'm very encouraged. This was a very disappointing information I shared with you, but I also want to share with you something which is very encouraging, and that is the tradition of resistance to injustice at home and abroad. That has been very strong in this country. The words that you just heard of the Senator Beveridge, they were not allowed to go without some response. So there are these great people who formed the Anti-Imperialist League in 1898. Among them, the most prominent was Mark Twain, who, with his scalpel of wit and humor, exposed the hypocrisy of our government then in treating with other countries. Other people were the Harvard professor William James, the head of the American Labor Organization at that time, and Andrew Carnegie, the industrialist and philanthropist. So the point is that people from different walks of life, different professions joined, and that is a model we should continue to have before us to resist our government's depredations. What can we do to raise public awareness in this country? I think Mariam mentioned in her introductory remarks, and Professor Junaid Ahmed also reiterated that there is not enough information that is reliable available to us in this country. I believe the typical scenario is that the regime change happens, the Department of State says, no, we have nothing to do with it. And most people, I would say, go with the official narrative. They don't do much research. They don't have time to go to alternative means, independent means of information, and they just go with whatever they know through CNN or other mainstream media. So I think we have a huge job on our hands to inform and educate the American people, because it is their government that is doing all this mischief. I was being interviewed by somebody just recently, and the host asked, one question from the audience was, why should Americans bother about Pakistan? You know, there's so many problems in the world, and so why should they? It was a very good question. So I said, simply because it is our government that is destroying that country. So we have to make this campaign a part of daily lives to continue informing. How can we do that? Well, first of all, we have to create empathy for the people of Pakistan. Not, I would not say Pakistan, just the suffering masses. How their lives were in April 22, when this regime change operation was orchestrated by this conspiracy between the US and the Pakistani army elite. How were they living? What was the kind of life they had? Growth rate, economic growth rate was close to 7%, highest in 17 years. Even the World Bank praised Pakistan's then government's poverty alleviation methods, like the ESAS program, compassion program. So I cannot go into details that much because of limited time, but just remember that these facts are not known to most Americans. So what will be gained by informing the people here? They would be able to pressure their congressional leaders that we should have a more just foreign policy. Our foreign policy is a disaster, and it has been a spectacular failure. You know, the examples are in front of us. I will just have time to maybe refer to two examples. Our government destroyed Iraq. Do we have any respect? Our presence in the Middle East, except our one ally there, Israel, American government is not welcome anywhere in the Middle East. Even Saudi Arabia is distancing itself, very staunch ally. So what have we gained from the invasion of Iraq in 2003? Nothing. We have lost a lot of prestige. And what about the second example I can share with you is the one of Afghanistan. 19 years, trillions of dollars lost, thousands of lives lost. And as one observer put it, at the end of 19 years, after the withdrawal of the US troops, and this I think is wonderful and very true. He said, what has America gained from this 19-year war? He said, well, the US has been able to replace the Taliban with Taliban. You remember when the invasion of Afghanistan occurred, Taliban were in power. And then when the US left, Taliban are in power. So this is actually a self-defeating, ultimately a suicidal policy. And I think it's our duty to do our share in educating the masses so they can pressure the government to do something to change their way of dealing with the world. The priorities of the US are not necessarily the priorities of other countries. When some independent-minded leader like Imran Khan says that he's with everyone in peace, he's friends with everyone in peace, and not a friend with anyone in war. He's not accepted. Why? Because we are used to dealing with vassal states that they have no right to have an independent foreign policy. If Imran Khan goes to Russia to buy cheaper oil and cheaper wheat for his people, he is punished. India goes, even Sri Lanka went there for the same reasons, they were not. Why? Because Pakistan's history shows that Pakistan has been dependent on the US, and the US has made it so dependent that even the army elite is completely at the disposal of the US. So one is awareness. Okay, how can we do that? We can have seminars, we can show documentaries. There are great documentaries available. Have people meet in your homes, meet in churches, in synagogues, libraries. Public libraries are a great place. Recently, I had a chance to go when Netanyahu launched his genocidal war on Hamas and Gaza. The church hosted the documentary called Israelism. That's an amazing documentary. I didn't know about it, and it is really almost must-see to understand the US youth and US population shift in understanding, how they change from how they used to view Israel to now how they view now. So the point is, awareness can be raised through many means. One means would be to let our government know that we, the citizens of the US, of Pakistani origin, are also the victim of your regime change. Well, how is that? Well, we live in the US, but our families are living in Pakistan. I will share with you this bit of information, and that source is Ryan Grimm, formerly of The Intercept, and now Drop Notes News. 2 days ago, I heard this very shocking news that an Australian citizen of Pakistani origin receives a phone call from the phone number of his brother. But the person talking on the other side is not his brother. It is somebody from the army. His brother had been kidnapped a few days before. So the Australian of Pakistani origin is very happy to see that the call is coming from the brother. And then this person, the army person, ISI, I don't know, it needs to be investigated more. He tells the Australian citizen, your brother will be released in half an hour if you delete the tweet that you made, which criticized the government for putting Imran Khan in jail illegally, unjustly. So this conversation goes back and forth for almost 6-7 minutes. First, the Australian Pakistani takes a stand and says that there are certain rules and regulations. And this person on the other end almost uses swear word about rules and regulations. We don't care about them. Next time we'll bring the whole family, your family here. So torture, then the brother is tortured while the other brother is listening to him on the phone. So I think we need to make our congressional leaders aware of such things. Brad Sherman was able to do some of that work in the congressional hearing, and it is not easy to orchestrate such hearings. We all know that. So it was thanks to Professor Junaid Ahmed and his group, their sustained and courageous efforts, that this happened. And we have to support Pakistani American Political Action Committee, who also can do a great deal of work in having listenings, hearings, which can be then publicized. If I say something, it is just an individual. If I write an article, individual. If I give a media talk, just one individual. I think we have to have more than ourselves, especially congressional leaders involved in telling our government what they're doing is not only immoral, unethical, it is also suicidal, ultimately. Now, this incident I mentioned, not to frighten you, Junaid, but I am sure you already know about it. You know almost everything that happens with regard to Pakistan and the world. So I am very impressed. You keep sending me some information that I don't know, and then I become better informed. So I appreciate that. What can be done other than that? So Brad Sherman asked Donald Lu some questions. Unfortunately, of all the congressional leaders, only 3 asked some relevant questions. The rest were really a waste of time. And I think they intended to waste time. So Donald Lu was asked this question. And of course, Donald Lu said, it is all nonsense. It's conspiracy theory. Nothing happened, no cipher. And Brad Sherman very quietly, calmly told him that he should go and visit Imran Khan in jail. That's one thing that he said to him I really liked. The other thing that he said to Lou, which I appreciate very much, was that our congressional leader from California, he said to him, if he knows of the Pakistani American citizens of Pakistani origin in Pakistan who have been placed on the exit control list called ECL. They cannot leave the country. They are US citizens. And Brad Sherman asked, why is it happening? And the answer was again very, very I would say stupid answer. He says, well, Pakistan has its own rules, right, and regulations. And Brad Sherman actually put this person in place. But these people, Assistant Secretary of State, he has a pretty high rank, but they're really functionaries. They're low-level functionaries compared with Biden. Biden is the person behind the regime change, and his Secretary of State, Blinken, who didn't blink an eye destroying a country. Junaid, can you please tell me how much time I have left?
Professor Jabbar, if we can wrap up.
Okay. So shaming is very important. The kind of shaming that was done in the hearing by Brad Sherman, I think all leaders, I think it has been done very well in Pakistan. Imran Khan has done an excellent job. We can learn from him how to do that to our political leaders. Despite the large-scale rigging, putting the leader in jail, banning the party from using the party symbol or the party name, the members of this party, PTI, Tehreek-e-Insaf, still won the election. And the politicians who sold out, went to the other side, they had to leave the country because they couldn't face the public, or they contested the elections and not one of them succeeded. So that is a very good way of shaming. And then when Shahbaz Sharif went to Saudi Arabia, people in the public square called him a thief. It has been done to General Bajwa in France when he was vacationing there. So these people should not have any peace of mind, and they should be safe only inside the four walls of their homes. Maybe I should say the 100 walls of their homes, because their walls are not just four. So thank you very much for listening. I will stop here. I'm out of time.
Thank you so much, Professor Jabbar. And just before I hand it over to Professor Sachs, you just made me think of three very quick things. When we talk about the information that we're getting in the United States, it's always fascinating to see how much the New York Times, the Washington Post, think tanks here, so obsessed with Pakistan. During the War on Terror years, we would hear about it every single day, and how it's completely been silent after what has happened in March, April 2022. And my suspicion is a paper like the New York Times, the less they say about Pakistan, the better. I mean, I think they're very content in what has happened, the outcome favorable to Washington, but they also are aware that probably 80 to 90% of Pakistani Americans are supportive of Imran Khan, detest what has happened. So I think their calculation is the less said, the better. They don't want to alienate the Pakistani American community. The other thing, the cipher, it was hilarious. I mean, I think we may speak about it later on, but it's for years they were denying, both the Pakistani government and the State Department, that there's this ludicrous thing as the cipher existed. Once, as you mentioned, the Intercept kind of revealed the contents of it, the State Department said, oh, well, it probably does exist, but it's normal interaction, diplomatic interaction between countries. It's a joke. And the Pakistani government and the Pakistani military, even perhaps more laughably, all of a sudden says, okay, if it does exist, Khan, by revealing this to the public, waving a piece of, he's threatened national security and is now a traitor. So that was and the one thing about Donald Lu that we hear so much about, Assistant Secretary of State for South Asian Affairs, is the funny thing was when I was in Pakistan and his name was getting his name was at the tip of the tongue of everyone. It was interesting that even in my hometown and village, that I was told that Professor Saab, this one thing we want to say, this Donald Lu, I was like, yeah, he's a big a very profane word of profanity in Urdu, but basically capturing the fact that for me, which was quite hilarious, about 220 million Pakistanis now know the name of Donald Lu from the villages and the towns. And we would joke that, probably his own family, extended family, didn't even know his name, but 220 million Pakistanis now know his name. So that was quite funny. Without further ado, Professor Sachs, I have already introduced you, and I did want you to share your thoughts. I just wanted to once again reiterate how, just like Professor Jabbar, Professor Sachs has been this lone voice consistently speaking about what happened in Pakistan and not letting it be a part of the dustbin of history, keeps on raising the issue. And just like Professor Jabbar, Professor Sachs has been so incredibly supportive of people like me who continue to write on the subject. So I did want to thank you off the bat, Professor Sachs, that you really have created some space for us to continue to speak forward on this issue. So without further ado, our towering intellectual, Professor Sachs, welcome, and please do share your thoughts.
Thank you so much, and it was wonderful to hear Professor Jabbar just now, so I really learned a lot and admire you, Professor, very much. And Junaid, thank you for inviting me. I can only be with you very briefly till the top of the hour, but just a couple of observations first, and then a couple of thoughts about things to do. Of course, the fact is straightforward that the U.S. Overthrows governments for a living. So this is not unique to Pakistan, quite the contrary. This is the normal modus operandi of U.S. foreign policy. And there have probably been, if we could count them comprehensively, at least 100 regime change operations since the end of World War II. There's a wonderful book, Covert Regime Change in 2017, which documents carefully 64 regime change operations between 1947 and 1989. I've seen a number with my own eyes. I obviously didn't see the events in Pakistan with my own eyes, but I know Prime Minister Imran Khan personally and admire him enormously, and followed events closely and was edified like everybody else by Ryan Grimm's wonderful expose of the cipher. So what to do? This is standard fare. American foreign policy is not very much influenced at all by American public opinion, even when we're directly in an extraordinarily dangerous war like we are in Ukraine. The public has no say, no knowledge. Nobody asks any questions. No one cares what the public feels, even when it's pushing us actually closer to nuclear war, which I believe that it is. So that is the second point, that it's not easy to influence things, and non-American, non-Pakistani attention in America to Pakistan is in the midst of everything else happening right now, as Junaid said, almost non-existent. So we have multiple foreign policy crises, and it will not be possible to get the attention of the U.S. government on what it did, or the public on what it did in Pakistan. But this is not to be hopeless about it. It's to suggest some approaches. First, one thing that I would very much suggest is and it may exist, and I apologize for not knowing it, but there should be a document that explains what happened in addition to what Ryan has so usefully provided. In other words, there should be a document that can be circulated that has all of the information and the sequel and the continued imprisonment of the Prime Minister and the current state of politics, so brought up to the present, to say this is what happened, this is what the U.S. has done. And if I can be at all helpful in that, of course, I would be happy to be. I'm not an expert on this at all. I'm an observer and a friend of the Prime Minister, and I am an expert in how awful our foreign policy is. So in that sense, I have a lifelong firsthand knowledge of a nasty, rapacious, lying U.S. government. And this is one of the sordid kinds of episodes in this. But having a document that you, as the experts and scholars put together, well documented, is enormously helpful because it can be sent to a lot of people that won't want to read it, but will have to know it. And I think that this is one basic point. A second point that I'm trying to figure out how to do, not easy, but I want to bring this more to the global diplomatic attention. My theory of change of the United States is mostly to bring awareness in the rest of the world to the delusional foreign policy of the United States, to help the U.S. overcome its delusions, not by getting the New York Times to print something which may be about the most impossible thing in the world, but to get other governments to say it's rather outrageous that you overthrew this government and many others, and this has to stop. So I work nonstop with the ambassadors from the UN, in the UN context. I would like to bring such a document, for example, to the attention of UN ambassadors. This is something that can be done. I have advocated, of course, without any success, but the advocacy counts as well, that the UN Security Council take up at least a look at events such as this, and because they are threats to the peace. They're threats to the global peace. They're not merely internal affairs of Pakistan or bilateral affairs of the US and Pakistan. They're threats to the global peace. And so I think that this is a UN activity as well. And third, I think that it is absolutely right and important to campaign actively for the safety of Imran Khan, for his return to politics, and for a worldwide awareness that a US-led grave injustice was done against the will of the Pakistani people. So that, I think, is absolutely possible. That's not so much internal US politics, it is more global advocacy. And I think it's very important. You know much better than I do the details of his safety or lack of safety in the current state of affairs, but I would be very happy to be part of something on the international side, and at least I have a good reach of people that can hear and that can be helpful as well. So you're completely on the right track, of course. What you are observing and what you have experienced, as all of you know very well, is not specific to Pakistan. This is a US war machine in the United States that is constantly running, very dangerous, out of control, and creating conflicts everywhere in the world. So this is not a singular episode. But my sense and experience is, first of all, the American people, if they knew and had the attention span and could be reached, none of which is true, but if they did, they would be against all of this. The American people have absolutely no interest, knowledge of Pakistan, and not one in 1,000 could point out Pakistan on a map, I'm telling you. because they probably couldn't even point out the United States on a map. It's just, this is not an issue. But if they knew about it, they'd be unhappy. I should add as a footnote, I do have to go in a moment, but I tried to get a story in the New York Times. In fact, I was told they're interested. And then when I said what I wanted to write about, they said, no, we're not interested. So this is not in any way easy. They know what they're doing. They are mouthpieces of the State Department, of course. Even more, they're mouthpieces of the CIA and the security state. So this is not simple. And but the rest of the world, or much of the rest of the world, needs to know, needs to have a documentary evidence, would be interested, and we need to do what we can to help Imran Khan be back in politics and be safe physically in his person as well. So I hope I'm not being naive, but just want to express my solidarity and to say that I'm happy to help on any of those points.
Thank you so much, Professor Sachs. I know you have a hectic schedule, so thank you so much for taking the time. And the only I will say is I will hold you to it. We really do need your support, and your suggestions are excellent. And I hope that many of us can produce something that would be useful in terms of conveying it to the circles that you know all too well. So, Professor Sachs, thank you so much.
Thanks everybody, and look forward to next steps together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor.
Bye-bye.
So at this point, before we take it to Q&A, I would like to introduce a very special guest who is able to join us, Ms. Khadija Shah, who is one of the most prominent, you can say, organizers and political workers in the country, which I think during this whole episode has, again, very courageously been involved in raising awareness about the injustices and cruelties that have ensued March, April 2022. Just a little bit about her. We'll start with this. Khadija Shah spent 6 months in jail without due process for participating in protests against the illegal arrest of Imran Khan in May of last year, from court premises, of all places. After her release, she had been working to rehabilitate the victims' families of the brutal crackdown in Pakistan, which resulted in the imprisonment of more than 10,000 political workers. So Ms. Khadija has played an incredibly brave role in all of this, and we would love to hear briefly some of her thoughts and reflections on what's been going on. So Khadija, welcome. Thank you for joining us, and please do share your insights.
Thank you, Junaid. Thank you for having me and having such an esteemed panel, and you chose to include me in it. I'm really grateful. So I would like to say that I was, first off, not in jail for 6 months. I was in jail for 8 months. I was held captive in Kot Lakhpat jail, Lahore, for 7 months. And then I was transferred to Quetta, Balochistan, where I stayed for another around 22 days. So it was a long incarceration. And what I learned, I mean, the thing that impacted me the most while I was incarcerated was the fact that, we believed that we had somewhat of a justice system in Pakistan. We still had that, it was a difficult justice system. We realized it took a bit of time, but we felt that there was some sort of a system in place. And that was one shock that I got as soon as I was imprisoned, because the first few days, it became completely apparent that there was going to be no due process. And I was multiple occasions told that point blank, because I used to question why I was there, and I would say, but they show me the proof, and where's the evidence? And they used to laugh and say, you are a bit deluded if you think that that's how things are going to work. But when I was there, the other thing that impacted me the most was the rest of the prisoners with me. And these were mostly very poor people, very poor Pakistanis who came out on the 9th of May because they believed in Imran Khan, because the state failed to deliver anything to them and their children for the last 77 years. And here was a leader for the first time who addressed their issues. He gave them a cancer hospital. He gave them a university, a world-class university, Namal. And then after that, in his government, his greatest initiatives were targeted to provide relief to the poorest. You had the Sehat card, which gave free health coverage. Then you had the langar khanas, which, people, the homeless could go and eat 2 square meals there. Then he made the panagas, where again, the homeless had a roof over their heads. And so, it's not that these people came out just because, Imran Khan was this politician who was being illegally taken away. It was because he meant a lot to them. He was part of the larger dream of a better, prosperous Pakistan, which they hoped for. And after that, when they were imprisoned and the brutal crackdown happened, now most of these people, they weren't arsonists, they weren't vandals. They were peacefully protesting along with me. I mean, I heard the call, I saw what had happened to Imran Khan. I was going to work and I simply turned my car around and went to protest because I saw the call on PTI official. And I did that and I went home. And then I was branded as the mastermind of all this carnage that took place, which was shocking to me. So obviously I stayed away from my home. I was told I was going to be taken in. And then eventually they started terrorizing my family. So I went and handed myself over, believing that, of course, there would be a justice system, but there was none. But as far as these people were concerned, I saw that it is extremely, extremely, difficult for them to even manage sort of being in prison, because it's an extremely expensive process. And their families, they were the primary breadwinners. And so without them, the families were not being able to sustain themselves. They had to sell everything they owned just to keep up with the person in prison, provide them with the basic necessities, come to court to see them, come to jail to see them, and then, pay their rents, pay for their utilities, pay for the children's fees. And what happened over time was that obviously they could not manage. And so they lost their homes and they had to pull their children out of schools. They couldn't attend to any health emergencies that they had. And now these thousands of prisoners across Pakistan are completely below the poverty line. So I wanted to help them even when I was in prison, but of course I was quite helpless. I myself was a prisoner and I would see them there. And once I got out, I started reaching out to them and figuring out what it is that they need to get back on their feet. And then we got a group of dedicated sort of, people who kind of had the same purpose together. And we started, approaching people for help and financial help and, gathering funds for them. So, just to tell you like a little bit about their condition, most of these people have like, children, especially in KP, where actually the crackdown was the worst in KP. They were shot at. So most of them are now physically disabled for life. So they can't even, do the jobs that they were doing previously. And then they have 5 to 6 children each. The children are all out of school. And I was just visiting these prisoners in Peshawar. And, this very old man, his son, who's in custody right now, he told me, he has 2 little children and a young wife. And we're not being able to support the children. And so his wife came up to me and said that, Baba, let's just sell the children. And, that is the level to which these people have now arrived at. So even when you talk about everything that's happening in Pakistan, I would request, do highlight the human rights abuses that are happening. And most people don't talk about the 10,000 prisoners. We are more focused on the larger picture of the regime change and the toppling of the government. And of course, Imran Khan, who is our primary concern, and we must have him come out. But there are so many Pakistanis who are suffering as a result of this regime change. And the American government must understand that these are the people of Pakistan, and you're constantly wondering why there's so much anti-Americanism in Pakistan. If you're going to pursue such policies, if you're going to support such measures, there is bound to be anti-Americanism in the world. And I feel like the Americans find a reliable they want a stable Pakistan. And I feel that they feel that having the military as allies, and we have a very strong, big military, which is supposed to keep the region stable, but they would be better placed to have faith in democracy. Let democracy run its course, and you will find a way more stable ally in Pakistan in the region than having these, regimes come in and, after every few years, we have a, sort of a military hybrid regime in Pakistan. So, I mean, that's just one thing I wish that you would also highlight in America when you are campaigning for democracy and for Imran Khan's release and, for this whatever's happened in the last 2 years, because I think that's absolutely crucial. There are just too many people suffering here now.
Great. Thanks so much, Khadija. We, are very lucky and fortunate to have you give these facts from the ground there. And I think you're absolutely right. While it is incredibly important to understand the big picture, how the role of the United States, the role of other actors within Pakistan itself, the kleptocratic politicians and the military establishment, the actual human element, that the incredible injustices, the cruelties, the repression that they have faced, and how that has affected their lives, that is as, or if not more important, to constantly highlight, to bring awareness onto what's going on, that these are the active, brutal consequences of what the powerful actors have produced within Pakistan. So I'm very grateful for that. Let's try to get a few of the questions that have come in, and anyone. Well, some of them are directed to specific individuals, but anyone can. In fact, even Mariam, if you want to contribute to these the kind of concerns and questions that they have. Let's see. Yeah, it's something that I kind of mentioned, but perhaps people would be interested in slightly more details about what transpired in March, April 2022. And it must be said, people often complain about former Prime Minister Imran Khan not having a very coherent critique at that specific moment of who was involved and so on. But it just shows that, I think, in my view, that Khan was not trying to put forward some conspiracy theory, all completely developed, coherent one. At that point, whatever evidence was coming his way is what he could point to. And of course, the clearest one was, of course, the diplomatic cipher, in which I think someone can talk about this more, but in which he was accused of aggressive neutrality, particularly with regard to the Russian special military operation in Ukraine. But I suspect in general, whether it's being, having this independent foreign policy that he says that could be friends with China, Russia, the United States, and so on. So that was the big complaint put forward in Donald Blue's remarks to the Pakistani ambassador, that Khan's aggressive neutrality, again, the ridiculous term they came up with, is the problem. So I did want to ask, again, maybe if anyone wants to elaborate, in what ways did local political elites and the military establishment contribute to Imran Khan's ouster? And how did these internal forces align with external forces, external influences? And by that, I think that we have now a good sense, even though, of course, many people still deny it, of the role of the United States. in that regime change. If anyone would want a slight comment, and again, to give kind of our audience a bit more of a context, what happened in terms of internally? I mean, people hear about, well, you know, there was a parliamentary no confidence vote. This is all constitutional parliamentary. There's nothing wrong with it, except for the fact that all of a sudden, within 1 month, all of these actors get together and say, oh, yeah, we want to get rid of him in a vote of no confidence. So I'm wondering, you know, Professor Jabbar or Khadija or Mariam, anyone that wants to address this specifically, like what exactly happened besides obviously the US role, the domestic political actors. So does anyone want to take up that question? Professor Jabbar, you're muted.
Yeah, okay. We all know that around the time when this plan was being hatched by the US with General Bajwa, at that time, there was a meeting. Zardari was the person who was doling out huge sums of money to buy the politicians who would be willing to leave Imran Khan's party. And so that could bring about the so-called constitutional or parliamentary change of government. So this, I think this fact that the money was being given, I have heard that the money was actually sent to Pakistan. It was the US was the funder. I'm not sure. I would like to know from the rest of you. I'm sure you're all very knowledgeable if the US was indeed providing the funds that were distributed at that time. Khadija's comments were really very helpful to understand what's going on right now, and very important that we get Khadija's input on that also, because she, Mariam, any of you, I would be very happy to hear your input on that.
Sorry, did anyone want to?
I think Khadija should go first, and then I'll conclude it.
Sure. Khadija? Yeah.
Yes, so I mean, I don't have any facts sort of substantiating the claim that the US may have provided funds to buy these parliamentarians and bring them onto the other side. But you know, Zardari Saab has been known to be doing this for a while, and he has enough money to spend on all of this, which he has been doing. I mean, that kind of remains the cornerstone of his politics. The PPP, for unfortunately, does not sort of go to the voter to get acceptance. They kind of engage in power politics and this sort of having these sort of paying people off and getting to, you know, sort of manipulating things to be in their favor. And that's what he's, you know, sort of known for. So I feel like that did happen. And it's, I think as far as the elite is concerned, I think our elite, the Pakistani elite, kind of is, stays very aloof. And they're not very politically aligned. They like to be aligned with any government that comes into power, because the elite has kind of been mollycoddled for the last 77 years, which is another problem that Pakistan has had. We have got, you know, this very huge disparity between the rich and the poor, and all efforts and initiatives for any kind of development have been targeted to the higher segments of society. So they feel quite privileged, and they do not like to sort of go against the system ever. And Imran Khan, I think, even though he enjoys immense popularity, I think within 90% of the people in Pakistan, it's the educated urban youth, it's the professionals, and it's the poor masses that support him. He's not incredibly popular with the elites because, again, he was not very forthcoming in facilitating them. His initiatives were always more targeted towards sustainable development. He wanted the Pakistani masses to rise from the bottom up. He wanted to empower them. He wanted to give them all the opportunities that they've never had. And so that's what he was working on. And this is not, I think, an agenda that aligns with the elite, which is kind of looking to protect its own interests. And then you must understand that elite is sort of has a, is kind of integrated with the status quo, right? And so they will be within a certain family, there would be two people doing business, and then there will be one person doing politics. And together they will have sort of, covered all their bases. And in one family, you will have half the people being, part of the PMLN, and the other half being part of the PPP. So they kind of cover their bases in all scenarios. So I think that to expect the elite would have, when the vote of no confidence happened, they were pretty sort of silent and sitting on the side, not really, and they're still not talking much. They are not talking about the thousands of people who I just mentioned, who've just gone under the poverty line. These are Pakistani people. And they're scared to help them. They're scared to, come and offer them assistance because they don't want to go against the system. And for me, it's very disheartening that you have gotten, this is a country of 220 million people, to have the entitlement to think that you are the only ones who deserve to progress. You're the only ones who deserve for their children to go to universities abroad. You're the only ones who deserve to whatever funds that we have gotten from the IMF, the World Bank, and various organizations over the years and accumulated such a huge debt. This debt has been primarily used to subsidize the elite and their enterprises and excessive government expenditure. So it's a lot of entitlement to think that you can use this country as your sort of, you have ownership over its resources. And when the rest of the people want some rights and they want betterment for themselves, you sort of become mute, or you stand against them, or you take away the one leader who represents them. So I think that that complicity and sort of that silence, I find to be, I think it's almost criminal. It's extremely selfish. And this mindset of the elite must also change with time, where they must realize that, in the progress of Pakistan, together, all of us as a whole, their progress, they're also going to be progressing in that way. They don't need to have this subsidized sort of, a silo of their own, that the country does better, it will be better for them as well. And they should support democracy and support sustainable development in Pakistan.
Right. Thanks, Khadija. The one thing that reminded me about elites, and of course these are elites, foreign elites, particularly in the Gulf countries. It was funny. I mean, I once joked with former Prime Minister Imran Khan. At the beginning of his term as Prime Minister, he was invited left, right, and center to many of these countries in the Gulf. They were enamored with his charisma. Of course, that started to change when they actually paid attention to his content, in which he would speak about, the Islamic welfare state, that Islam is on the side of the poor, marginalized, and the oppressed. And I think that speaking to those Gulf sheikhs, that they weren't too enamored with that discourse, and you saw the invitations drop right away. So it's just something funny that I've noticed from the beginning. So this is the way elites, both within Pakistan and outside, became a bit afraid of what Khan was talking about. But Mariam, did you want to add something?
I just want to second Khatija Shah. I think the Pakistani, I raised a question in the beginning that what is the difference between the previous coups and this politically engineered coup. One of the major difference is the resistance among the masses. And this resistance is not against the government, it's not against the army, but it is against the corrupt elites. The corruption is so embedded in our elite system that it's corruption versus Imran Khan. Imran Khan was the only person who, for the first time in the history of Pakistan, provided such something that people could connect with. And it's not only about the Pakistani masses. I've been living in Turkey for the last 6 years. The Turkish people, whenever you say Prime Minister of Pakistan, they still say Imran Khan. Professor Jeffrey, he said Prime Minister Imran Khan. So people are not able to accept the current political sitting government as a de facto government, and accept them as their ruling elites. System and status quo is one thing which can always, talk very easily with the current set of parties, call it Pakistan People's Party or Pakistan Muslim League Noon. Like you saw the cluster of these parties on one side and Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf on the other side. So it clearly shows that what falls on the right side of the spectrum. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Mariam. So here's a question that seems to be posed by quite a few of our audience members, and best kind of articulated by our good friend, Zainab. So she is asking, along with others, what role could academics and intellectuals, both within and outside of Pakistan, and this specifically for Khadija, what role can they play in supporting and being in solidarity with those people who are still struggling, sacrificing everything against this regime? And I like what Mariam said. A lot of people will still continue to call Prime Minister Imran Khan. Great point. I mean, it reflects a refusal to accept what has transpired. So yeah, Khadija, I mean, what role can academics play? And I would say that particularly in light of a rather unfortunate role that much of the intelligentsia, Pakistani, both within and abroad, role they have played in terms of really being silent on what's been going on. And it seems like part of it, maybe a substantial part of it, has been their contempt and envy. You described the word of Imran Khan from the beginning. So in light of this kind of the dominant trend of within this intelligentsia of kind of distancing themselves of anything going on because of for some reason, their hatred of Imran Khan, what can those of us that actually do want to be in solidarity, or do want to contribute to whatever can create a healthier political climate in which Imran Khan and others can continue to participate in politics? So I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I think what you are already doing, that is absolutely, I mean, you're raising awareness, and it is absolutely crucial to keep raising awareness and keep talking about things, because most of us, unfortunately, we can't just go out and overthrow the system. We must operate within the ambit of, we all have our own restrictions. You people are sitting in the United States of America and you're campaigning and you're trying to draw attention, even though you, like Professor Sachs also just said, and Professor Jabbar also said, it's very difficult to get the attention of, American press and all towards this issue, because for them, it's something that they don't want to talk about. But, keeping the pressure on, keep talking about it, keep raising awareness on the human rights abuses that are happening in the wake of the VNC and the overthrow of Imran Khan's government. And, we have a marvelous sort of example right now, a few days earlier in Pakistan. Professor Riaz was picked up in Karachi, and he went missing for a number of hours. And later he spoke to the press and media, and he said it's because we had a syndicate meeting, and the government was trying to exert pressure on one of the judges who had written to the Supreme Court saying that a lot of pressure is being put on me. And as a result of that, they were trying to oust him by declaring his degree to be fake. So Professor Riaz was a member of the syndicate that had to judge from the university whether the degree was fake or real. And he was very much against this sort of bullying and having this fake sort of declaration that the degree of the Justice Jahangiri is fake. So he was abducted before the meeting and then later released after the meeting was over. And then the syndicate declared his degree, I believe, declared the degree to be fake. But he came out onto the media and he spoke very openly about the fact that this is what transpired. I was picked up because I was against this. And I'm in a state of shock that I was abducted in broad daylight. So I feel like, and that raises awareness. When you have the courage to speak truth to power, that motivates others to do so. That gives people the courage to use their voice, to write, to use their voice, to come out. You see, because what we're doing, what all of us are doing, we've almost become scared of having our constitutional rights in Pakistan. It is our freedom of expression is our constitutional right. Freedom of protest is our constitutional right. Freedom of assembly is our constitutional right. But over the last 2 years, because of the brutal crackdown on all these freedoms, people have become so scared of exercising these rights or demanding them. So it's very important to not be scared of what is your right, to understand that you are not doing anything illegal when you are operating within the ambit of the Constitution and the rights that it affords you. And that the more you sort of, with bullying and aggression, the thing about bullies is that the more you cover to them, the more they bully you. So to have a certain amount of courage to stand up to it and accept the consequences, if the consequences get dire. I went to prison for 8 months. It wasn't an easy time. But there was this one, I had this faith and I had this sort of iman where I decided that, I'm going to just stand by truth. There's whatever the consequences may be, I know what the truth is. I know that I am no mastermind. I know that I was completely innocent. I know what they're asking. The Imran Khan, our leader, asked none of us to go there. I never spoke to him. He never asked me. He was in custody. How could he have asked anybody to go anywhere? It was an impromptu protest, and people started walking towards wherever they did. And so I had that faith in my heart, and I said, I'm not going to be scared, and I'm going to just kind of stand with the truth and what's right. And I think if we all did that at a larger scale, all of us, and we stood up for our rights, simply for our rights, we're not demanding anything illegal. We are not against the state. This is not a mutiny. This is not a rebellion. These are all organs of our state. We respect all institutions. We want all institutions to play their constitutional role. And we want our rights to be given to us. And here are these 10,000 people all over Pakistan with no rights right now, no access to justice. Their families are suffering. And we want justice for them. And hold these people accountable who are sitting on these positions, the judges who are there to dispense justice, keeping God at their witness. They must dispense justice. And if they're not, they should be held accountable. So I think we need to just have stronger voices. And I think that's the most we can do, or the least we can do right now.
Yeah, thanks so much, Khadija. Just one or two final questions. So our good friend, Naseem Basri, she's asking about the relationship between the feminist movement in Pakistan, and she was referring specifically to that which has erupted over the past few years in Iran. So the question, I guess, broadly is, what was the relationship of this mass movement following Imran Khan's ouster and generally the support for Khan and its relationship to a women's rights feminist movement. And because there has been questions have been raised often that, well, Imran Khan seems a bit of a conservative, and of course the extreme accusations, well, he's a misogynist, he's a sexist. So it'd be interesting to explore this issue. What has been kind of the relationship between the women's rights movement in Pakistan, or the feminist movement, and the movement in support of Khan? So maybe Khadija, again, if you would like to address that.
So I think the women's rights movement that you're talking about, I would think that we're referring to the Aurat March, which has started happening in Pakistan, and they've been accused of not being supportive of the PTI and the women of the PTI. There were around 78 women who were imprisoned during the last 2 years at Kot Lakhpat Jail, Lahore. And there were very few, there was they weren't spoken for by these organizations. Usually when we've seen that if Imran Khan has had a slip of tongue, or he's tried to express an opinion, which is his personal opinion, there is a huge amount of backlash against him from these forums. But when when the 78 of us were imprisoned, there was hardly any, talk for us in support of us. So I think, and it's, I don't believe that when movements become politically aligned, then they retain their essence. As a women's rights movement, you cannot be aligned to political parties. You're talking for women. You should talk for women across the board. But in Pakistan, I feel that all organizations have political sort of leanings and affiliations, and then their activism becomes very selective. They get more active when it concerns them. So if the same were done to, let's say, to the women of the PPP or to the women of the PMLN, you would hear loud, angry voices condemning it. But when it was done to the women of PTI, and it was unprecedented in the history of Pakistan for so many women to be put in jail, there was hardly a whimper coming out of them. So I don't believe that these could then be very genuine movements. I do hope that they become more objective and they sort of relieve themselves of political affiliations and speak for women's rights across the board. As far as Imran Khan and his misogyny and sexism and all of this is concerned, again, we have in Pakistani politics, we've had leaders of the PMLN like Khwaja Asif stand on the assembly floor and make very sexist comments on Shireen Mazari, who was the human rights minister for Imran Khan. There have been the PMLN, many of the PMLN spokespeople and leaders have come out and consistently spoken about PTI Jalsas and how the women over there are dancing and singing, and it's a culture of sort of an inappropriate behavior. So, one should sort of look inwards at if you were above all of that, I would understand that you find a few comments of Imran Khan, which again which are taken out of context. Imran Khan has never been, I've never felt that as a leader, he's had any oppressive sort of views about women. In fact, his party, the PTI, is even in the elections of 8th of February, the largest number of seats contested by women were from the PTI, not from the People's Party of PMLN. And I'm not talking about the reserve seats, I'm talking about the General Assembly seats. So PTI, and again on the 8th of February, you saw that the majority of the vote cast for PTI was also women. So you can't have a leader who is sexist and misogynist, and then you have the majority of the women of the country supporting him. I mean, the two just don't meld. So I think that this is all this is all narrative building. It's disingenuous, and it's frankly, I think it makes no difference because Imran Khan continues to be the most popular leader in the country and largely supported by women. And that's probably one of the reasons why 78 women went to prison, because the women were to be taught a lesson. That, you know, because there were women coming to the jalsas, the women coming to the protests, and this was a message being sent by the government in Punjab. And again, I would say, I would like to say that it was all these 78 women were all hounded and incarcerated by the government of Punjab. This did not happen in KP. It did not happen in Sindh. It only happened in Punjab, where women were incarcerated. So we can see where the sexism and misogyny is sort of stemming from. And it's unfortunate. I wish it were not the case.
Yeah, thanks so much, Khadija. I don't know, Professor Jabbar, did you want to add anything to that?
I just wanted to thank Khadija for her bringing us up to date of what's happening. And what I would like to say is that all these comments that we have heard, all these suggestions, Junaid, you have another job added to your list. That is what Professor Sachs also mentioned. We should put together a document, a book, a short book. And you could probably be editing it and then have people like Professor Sachs and include Khadija and Mariam Khan, let them also write some chapters. That will be a good source of changing the mindset of people around. So thank you all. I appreciate, I learned a lot from this discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Professor Jabbar. I mean, when Professor Sachs was speaking about this, producing something concrete, could be a booklet, book, document that can be distributed, and particularly, the kind of ties that he has within the UN, within amongst the diplomatic community around the world, I think that would be actually quite useful. And I would really, really love for you, Khadija, Mariam, and others who are on the same page to contribute to that. That's a great idea. So we are running out of time, and I'm supposed to give some brief closing remarks. I mean, before anything, I will just say that, this has been an amazing session in which we have gotten viewpoints from a variety of different angles, but all of them putting forward a strong indictment of the way the Pakistani military civilian regime has behaved, both at the time of the regime change and afterwards, especially. I think that our audience will come from this with a much better idea of what's going on in Pakistan, especially, as I alluded to before, since the mainstream American media has just gone silent on these developments in Pakistan, in contrast to their obsession with Pakistan during the War on Terror years, where you would see an article about Pakistan every single day. Pakistan is not doing enough, blah, blah, blah. We know that narrative. So I think that this makes our role even more important, to continue to put out material and speak out on these developments. And particularly since we all recognize that there has been a significant betrayal by people, I mean, whether it's in the women's rights movement or other liberal progressive spaces, in terms of speaking out against what's been happening. And it's almost like it's been their Achilles heel on PTI. And I would argue that the larger issue and phenomena that this reflects is that of native Islamophobia. Even within Pakistan itself, we often, think of Islamophobia as some external thing confined to Western societies and so on. But increasingly, we see, even within the Muslim majority world, the attempt to curtail any discourse, any political discourse motivated by faith. And so I think that as soon as someone like Khan introduces this concept of an Islamic welfare state, a narrative and discourse that does not fit neatly into the larger discourse of the NGOs, the Western-funded NGOs that like to have put these terms in in a secular language, which is fine. But what happens is often they then become very allergic to those political actors that kind of demonstrate their political commitments based on their faith tradition, in this case, Islam. So I think we have seen some of that as I often say, the Islam and Islamic discourse being the Achilles heel of many of the folks involved in the human rights and women's rights movement. So there's one thing related to that. And the other thing I would say is, part of this whole the unique type of contempt and wrath against Khan and I guess by extension PTI has been their mobilization of Pakistanis, not just in KPK or Balochistan and in Sindh and in Karachi, but within Punjab itself. I think this has kind of been the unforgivable act when, in terms of the way the military establishment sees all these developments, that the province, which should have historically been the one that loves the military establishment, all of a sudden mobilized itself and spoke out against what's going on. And again, as Khadija said, this doesn't mean that they want to, abolish the military or completely, destroy that institution, but it does mean that they have become cognizant and aware of the way the military establishment can often behave in quite authoritarian and repressive ways within the country itself. Because, the people of KPK, of Balochistan and other provinces have a sense of the way that often the military behaves in deeply problematic ways internally. But the fact that consciousness has now spread to Punjab is really, it's really, an historic development, because that certainly wasn't there before. And so I think that's been one of the things that has really annoyed the military establishment. And this kind of explains just the incredibly vicious and brutal way that it has responded. And of course, the other reason simply being that we've had many prime ministers overthrown and deposed in the past, and usually they go without a whimper. People are not taking to the streets to defend, say, for example, when Nawaz Sharif was ousted in 1999 by the Musharraf coup. Well, people really indifferent. And part of that has been because ordinary people have seen literally no difference in their lives, whether it's been a military regime or a regime of the kleptocratic politicians of the PMLN or of the PPP. But in this situation, we saw something radically different, a first of its kind. And that is, they've ousted a prime minister by hook or crook. But afterwards, you've seen the largest national demonstrations in the country's history and spread across all the provinces. This is unique. It also has demonstrated that PTI and that larger movement around Khan is not confined to one specific province or the other. So these are all these are the strong points of this movement that has frightened, that has terribly frightened the elites, both the civilian as well as the military elites. So I think that, looking at all of these factors, and of course what we've been speaking about, what this panel has been about, the regime change facilitated both by domestic actors, someone like General Bajwa. And again, we are talking here of, even when it comes to the military establishment, we are speaking here about the generals, the top brass. It's interesting, and I have, firsthand knowledge of this from my own students and so on, that a significant chunk within the military itself, maybe 99% of the soldiers, but even a significant percentage of the officer corps, particularly junior and mid-rank officers, they have been with Khan throughout this period. It's just that the repercussions of kind of openly speaking out, although we know so many of them who have sacrificed a lot in terms of resigning, no longer getting their pension. So we also have to be aware that within the military ranks, there does exist this massive dissent concerning how the military top brass and high command and the generals have operated. So it's important to notice that, but also, of course, realize it's very, very difficult internally to articulate that disagreement, that profound disagreement with the way the establishment has been operating. So that on the one hand, and of course the role principally of the United States, which has seen, I often say, Khan as not necessarily a threat in many other dimensions, but certainly what we can call as a geopolitical menace. And why is he a geopolitical menace? Because he refuses to take sides. What he wants, as he's always said, with specifically, he states this, that with the United States, we would love to be friends in peace, but we can't be in war. And so he's consistently reiterated this. But as I was saying earlier, when Donald Lu was having that conversation with the Pakistani ambassador in DC, the absurd term, and this has kind of become comical now, of Khan demonstrating aggressive neutrality. And specifically, that was in regard to the Russian operation in Ukraine. But I actually think it's more than that. It is the entire kind of political life of Khan, beginning, say, from when the War on Terror began in 2001. It's important to remind our listeners and viewers that Khan maintained a very principled position from the beginning, which was the position shared by many throughout the world in terms of the U.S. Global War on Terror, and specifically in Afghanistan and Pakistan, what they called the AFPAC. And that was very simple, that this war that they're launching is going to take a huge human toll, that it will kill lots of people, displace lots of people. And that's exactly what happened, both in terms of operations in Afghanistan, as well as the pressure on the Pakistanis to undertake those operations in the northwest of Pakistan. And the other part of it, again, which many of us share throughout the world, progressives and other human rights activists, is that this policy will only fuel more militancy in these areas. So I think the American national security state has never forgiven Khan for effectively being right on these, and being right about ultimately the fact that there is no military solution to what's going on in Afghanistan or Pakistan. So I think that they never really forgave him, which again explains why when Biden comes to power, no conversation, no phone call with Khan, including, and this is the most scandalous part, even when Biden is relying on Pakistan to facilitate the American withdrawal from Afghanistan. I mean, it's incredible. Even during that time, no phone call to Prime Minister Khan. So it's absolutely, absurd and ridiculous of how the U.S. has behaved, especially when Biden came to power. So I think that beyond just this being about Russia in terms of his neutrality, I think it extends broadly. And this is what has made both Washington afraid, as well as domestic elite actors within Pakistan, especially the military establishment, that this is someone, Khan, who wants to play an active role in carving out the foreign policy direction of the country, which in the past, there's the tacit, or even more than tacit, open agreement that, well, we'll let you guys, the military establishment, you can deal with foreign policy and national security, and we will deal with domestic affairs. And what does that mean? We will plunder and pillage the country. We'll do that, and you guys can do that. And Khan, of course, broke that model. And he said that, no, I want to play an active role in the direction our country's foreign policy will take. And that means kind of having obviously good relations with old friend China and others. And the one final point I will make is that even within the Islamicate or within the Muslim world, Khan was going in a direction that was very supportive of almost a counter-hegemonic force within the Muslim world, right? So, of course, the Pakistanis have been dependent on the Saudis, so he couldn't make that clean break at all. Obviously, we understand that. And that was, displayed most vividly when Khan was invited to, he was like almost the main guest, in this summit that was taking place in Kuala Lumpur, in which countries such as Iran, Turkey, Qatar were being invited. And the Saudis saw it correctly as this kind of counter-hegemonic force within the Muslim world emerging that challenged their kind of monopoly and hegemony over all things related to the Muslim world. And the funny thing, I mean, the tragedy was that just a day before Khan was going there, and of course, I think people will know the very warm relationship that Mahathir and, both his wife as well had with Khan. So he was almost going to be like the main chief guest there, but he was summoned to Riyadh, and MBS told him in no uncertain terms that you are not to go to that summit. And in fact, we now know about that even then Khan didn't refuse to go to the summit. He called Mahathir as well as Erdogan to let them know this is the position he's in. And they were saying that, look, your economy is dependent on the Saudis. No need to undertake this. So as I was saying, increasingly those Gulf countries that were so enamored by his charisma and so on, they increasingly started to despise him as well, as the Pakistani local elites, as Washington, because he really represented a new and challenging force within the Muslim Ummah, and along with these other countries that could actually present some formidable challenge to the hegemony and the domination of the Saudis over the Muslim world. So, Khan in that sense represented a threat at many levels. Now, that threat was simply about asserting some independence, some sovereignty of Pakistan, while being friends and having amicable relations with everyone. So I think that there are a lot of levels in which we need to understand why all of these forces together came and implemented the full wrath against Khan at that particular point. And this is, I'll end by saying, and that this is in some ways the most amazing and extraordinary aspect of all of this, that literally all of these powerful actors within Pakistan, the two dominant political parties that happen also to be the two richest families in Pakistan, the military high command, not the entire institution, but the top brass, the generals, Washington, Riyadh, all of these forces reigned against him, yet he still remains the absolutely most popular individual within the country. I mean, all of those critics of Khan, and I'm not saying that they're not legitimate criticisms to be had of him, but the ones that say, well, he's completely, people hate him, etc., and so on. And, this was most, absurdly proclaimed on our wonderful friends at Democracy Now!, when they had invited progressive activists to say that, well, Khan is not really popular at all, no one really likes him, and so on. He's a very urban, educated, middle-class constituency, which, of course, I say, what's wrong with that? I mean, there's nothing wrong with having an educated, and his views are identical to those of the Taliban. And as Khadija was pointing out, this is a very interesting this is an interesting comparison. I'm assuming that that the Taliban also have kind of this huge membership of women, and they'd be more than willing to appoint someone like Shirin Mizari, etc. And so it was just ridiculous. It's comical to make that claim. You can again be critical of his own conservative views, but at the same time, very much acknowledge that this guy is not trying to impose those on anyone, including his own people within his cabinet. So I think that a lot of that, the Western progressive media was reaching out to the so-called progressives and liberals in Pakistan, who basically affirmed a single narrative that Khan is this kind of horrible reactionary character. And that's obviously not been the case. And so I think that we must realize that all of these forces have, arrayed themselves against Khan. But despite that, Khan, the movement, I mean, which was seen in terms of the elections in February this year, despite all the fraud, rigging, everything they could possibly do, the movement still wins the majority of the seats. So that should give an indication to all of those folks who were, completely in denial about Khan's popularity and so on, that yes, and I'll often say this, were there a presidential system in Pakistan, one person, one vote, does anyone have any doubt that amongst the political class that Khan would win hands down? No, I mean, anyone serious would have no doubt about that. So I mean, I'll just end on this note that we must all realize that all of these forces have been arrayed against Khan from the time of March, April 2000, and yet he doesn't go away. It is from his supermax prison to what he's undergoing now. And as Khadija was pointing out, all of the torture, repression, imprisonment, and so on that has taken place. This movement has not been defeated. And inshallah, we can continue to come up with ways of supporting the movement, being in solidarity with it, those of us who are outside the country, making sure to do as much as possible to propel this movement forward and to not let it be defeated by the powers that be, both within Pakistan and externally. Sorry for my long rant and speech here, but again, I want to say how incredibly grateful we all are, not just me, but the entire audience, to have this panel. Professor Jabbar, Khadija, I know this was very last minute for you, but we are so incredibly grateful that you were able to make it. And of course, Professor Sachs, who's been, I mean, in some ways, perhaps the only Western public intellectual to consistently speak about this when no one else has wanted to. So again, I thank all of you and Mariam as well. All of you for your analysis, for your input, and for your ongoing hard work to keep this issue alive, to not let it be destroyed by anyone. So with that, thank you to all of you. Thank you to our audience members for joining us. And if you weren't able to make this, hopefully we should have this on YouTube very soon. So thanks so much, Khadija, Professor Jabbar, and Mariam, and of course, Professor Sachs. Thank you.